Good Friday morning. I'm Valerie Castro.
And I'm Zinklea Samoa, in for Joe in Savannah. Right now on Morning News Now, eyes on 2024. New details this morning on President Biden's plans to announce his re-election bid for the White House. Multiple sources now telling NBC News the announcement could come as soon as next week. We'll bring you what we know in just a moment. Charges dropped against actor Alec Baldwin in the wake of that deadly on-set shooting that killed Rust cinematographer Helena Hutchins. The, quote, new facts that have surfaced in recent days and why Baldwin may not be totally in the clear just yet. Also this morning, ethics in focus over at the Supreme Court as Chief Justice John Roberts is invited to testify on Capitol Hill next month over those recent revelations that his colleague, Justice Clarence Thomas, failed to disclose years of lavish trips and gifts on behalf of a wealthy Republican donor. We've got the latest from Washington. And behind the movement, it might be one of TikTok's latest top trends, but the history of majorette dancing goes much further than what you see on your screen. Very excited to bring you that one.
Looks like fun.
Yes. And we're going to start, though, this morning with politics and major news around the 2024 presidential race. Sources confirming to NBC News that President Biden will launch his re-election campaign next week.
3 sources familiar with the plans tell NBC News that announcement could come as early as Tuesday, April 25th, the anniversary of Biden's 2020 campaign announcement. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us now with more on this.
Monica, good morning. So let's just jump in here because for months, Biden and his advisors have remained pretty vague about his intentions for 2024. But now it seems he's ready to make it official. Of course, he spoke to today's Al Roker not too long ago. What do we know about this re-election announcement?
Hi there, Zinklea and Valerie. That's right. We knew for weeks now that President Biden and his top aides were closing in on the final decision of when to announce this re-election bid. So it wasn't so much a matter of if, but when. And yesterday, we were finally able to confirm with our sources that after returning from that trip in Ireland last week, the president did huddle with some of his closest aides and decided he was ready to essentially say go on launching that re-elect as early as next week. And this is a president who does like to look at dates and sort of the symbolism and sentimentality of anniversaries. And so if he does announce on Tuesday, it would be the 4-year anniversary of when he announced in 2019 he was going to run for 2020. Now, our sources tell us likely this is going to come in the form of a video announcement that gets tweeted out. And you won't see a traditional campaigning or anything like that from the president, because he still, of course, is going to be governing the country, and you'll see him out on the trail, so to speak, much, much later in the cycle. So we are expecting him to talk about why he wants to continue to run, and this was a theme that we saw in the State of the Union even this year, where he said he wants to, quote, finish the job, and I think you can expect to see that as a clear theme of this next run for the White House to keep it.
And Monica, one obvious thing that's different this year than from when he ran previously for the 2020 race, he is now the sitting president. And according to the latest CNBC All-America Economic Survey, Biden's approval rating fell by 2 percentage points to 39% compared with November. Is this a major concern for him as he prepares to launch this campaign?
The president is the first one who says he likes to ignore all the polls, but of course you can't totally ignore the political reality that his aides have been tracking heading into this. I think what you can expect a re-election campaign to talk about is they're going to try to focus on what they perceive as the accomplishments of the first couple of years in office, overseeing some of the worst of the coronavirus pandemic, coming to a much better place, implementing and signing, of course, some of that key legislation when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to manufacturing, the Inflation Reduction Act. I think they're going to point to all of those things. And I think they're also going to try to continue to draw this contrast. And they feel for some time in weighing this calculus of when they were going to announce, they said, well, if we wait a little bit longer, do we let then the Republican nomination fight drag out and we stay above it? That was one of the arguments they were considering. But again, they need to start raising their own money and building this out for now. And so this sort of tracks with what we've seen other incumbent presidents do in terms of timeline of when they're launching. And so we should expect this next week. But much like many things with Joe Biden, nothing is totally final and official until he actually does it.
Okay, we know all eyes will be on that announcement. Monica, thank you so much.
Thank you. And this morning, millions of Americans could be in line for another round of severe weather. In Oklahoma, officials confirmed that 3 people are dead after severe weather, including multiple tornadoes, moved through the state Wednesday night. Authorities say the damage, which includes downed trees and power lines, is widespread.
And strong storms also made their way through parts of Texas on Thursday. Nearly 5 inches of rain fell in some areas. The heavy rain brought in flash flooding, and even large hail was reported in several communities.
So let's take a closer look with our meteorologist, Angie Lassman. She's tracking the severe storms all around the country for us this morning. Good morning, Angie.
Morning, ladies. Yeah, we're actually going to see that severe threat diminish significantly compared to previous days, but it's not zero. So just be aware that we'll still have the heavy rain. We could see maybe some hail, maybe some gusty winds, but the tornado threat is really going to be low through the day today. We'll look ahead to the weekend, though, because that changes. Here's where we're currently sitting as far as the heavy rain goes, mainly focused from places like Indianapolis, stretching all the way down to Houston. You can see just how active all of that lightning is sitting offshore for places like Texas and Louisiana. That is the area really stretching in the same kind of vicinity where we're going to look for the potential for that flash flooding through the day today. We're talking impressive rainfall rates up to 1 inch per hour. So on already saturated grounds, it doesn't take a whole lot for that flash flooding to occur. And it does include places like Memphis, Jackson, Nashville, New Orleans, and Lake Charles. So just be aware of that if you're going to be out and about and on the roads through the day today. We're also going to see that rain eventually work into parts of the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. And we could pick up a good amount of rain in some areas that really do need it. We're looking at a really dry start to the year so far for places like New York. So we could see a ½ an inch to up to 1 inch and even isolated amounts up to 2 inches just north of Boston. So we'll watch for that rain to impact us just in time for our weekend plans. Switching gears, talking about the severe weather, like I said today, it's not all that impressive. 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts potentially. You can see when we deal with the green shading, it's really just general kind of thunderstorms with a couple of strong ones that could mix into there. So we'll still watch for the hail. It would be maybe up to 1 inch. And again, that tornado threat is significantly lower than it has been in previous days. As we transition into tomorrow, though, if you live in Savannah up to Norfolk, you're going to want to watch for the potential to see some of these stronger winds, potentially some of this damaging hail, and maybe even a brief tornado as we get into the afternoon hours and the evening hours of Saturday as that front works to the east. Now, a couple things, too. As the front works to the east, we're going to see temperatures quickly cool down, but not before they reach near record highs today, guys. 77 for Philly tomorrow before we get back to those 60s and more seasonal values.
What we expect in the spring, after
exactly.
All right, Angie Lassman, thank you.
The Supreme Court is expected to rule on the fate of abortion pills before midnight tonight. The court is deciding whether to uphold a decision from a Texas federal judge that would ban abortion pills nationwide.
Yeah, the Texas judge ruled the FDA did not properly regulate the pills, specifically questioning its safety for young girls and women. It's a question medical experts and previous health studies have disputed. The Supreme Court justices delayed the decision originally set to take place on Wednesday. Until the court makes a decision, the pills remain accessible across the country.
Let's bring in Rachel Reboucher for more on this. She is Dean and James Beasley Professor of Law at Temple University. Rachel, good morning. Just walk us through what we can expect to see today. Do you see the Supreme Court coming to a decision? And if so, would that go into effect immediately, or could they possibly delay all of this again?
They could delay again. They could say they need more time. I mean, really, the Supreme Court can do anything it wants. But I think that what we'll see today is the Supreme Court, and this is just my prediction, I've got no inside information, but we could see the Supreme Court stay the order of the Fifth Circuit, the Texas court, and basically keep the status quo in place. Because I think to do otherwise would really upend, so much practice around medication abortion. But we could see the Supreme Court say, we're going to consider this case on the merits. And in the meantime, the order goes into effect and the regulation of mifepristone, that first drug in a medication abortion, it changes.
And Rachel, whatever the ruling from the court may be, is this the end-all, be-all when it comes to the fate of abortion pills in the country? And the Biden administration does not exactly have constitutional power to override the court's decision, right, if they uphold the Texas ruling.
Yeah, the Biden administration would not override the court's decision, but the FDA, under the Biden administration, has its own powers to decide how to respond to the decision. Federal agencies have enforcement discretion. They have to decide, like all law enforcement, what actions are going to target. And like all agencies, the FDA could decide how it's going to respond to this particular order. And in fact, Congress has mandated that the FDA apply certain processes, that are constitutionally compliant, that are responsive to the rights of companies, distributors, manufacturers. So this is not going to be the last word in the conversation about medication abortion. The FDA is going to play a very powerful role in deciding what happens next to abortion pills.
We know several states are already stockpiling the pill. California has promised to protect abortion rights no matter what the Supreme Court decides. Do states have rights that supersede the Supreme Court? And can abortion pills be protected by the state?
They certainly can be protected by the states. What makes this issue so complicated is that the FDA regulates the distribution and manufacture of the pills, but states regulate the practice of medicine. So they tell providers what they can and can't do. Now, providers are also subject to restrictions that are put on drugs by the FDA. And this ruling, if this order goes into effect, it affects the FDA's role, but it doesn't affect how states can regulate providers themselves and how providers can, for instance, prescribe off-label. So we're going to see a lot of conflict between the states that seek to protect abortion access and courts like the District Court in Texas and the Fifth Circuit that are looking to restrict access to abortion pills.
All right. With all the insight, Rachel Reboucher, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And in Alabama, 3 more people are under arrest in connection to a deadly shooting at a Sweet 16 birthday party. Authorities say one of those suspects is 15 years old. In all, 6 people have been arrested in the case, each of them charged with 4 counts of reckless murder. 4 people were killed in that deadly shooting in Dadeville last weekend, including the brother of Alexis Dowdle, who was celebrating her birthday that night.
This morning, Alec Baldwin is no longer facing charges in the deadly Rust movie set shooting. Prosecutors in New Mexico yesterday announced that they dropped 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter against the actor for the 2021 death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins.
In a statement, the prosecutor said charges were dismissed because new facts had been revealed in the case, but added that, quote, this decision does not absolve Mr. Baldwin of criminal culpability and charges may be refiled. That news came on the same day filming resumed on the Rust movie, which is now taking place in Montana.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now to help us break this all down. Danny, good morning. So prosecutors haven't said what the new facts are that led them to drop these charges. They only said that they require additional investigation and forensic analysis. So what's going on here? What kind of evidence would they need to refile charges?
Probably the only thing more disappointing than the prosecutors in this case has been the prosecutor's PR person. Time after time, they've issued problematic statements, and here you go, here's another one. So they're saying essentially that, oh, we're going to drop it for now, but hey, we could always come back if we find more information and refile. But here's the thing. They've had all the information for over a year. They had exclusive possession of the evidence. They had access to everything they needed in order to make the critical decision to charge somebody with a crime, maybe the most important decision in a defendant's life. And now they're not so sure. So what are the new facts? And whatever those new facts are, why didn't they have them a year and a half ago? They had access to testing. Was it something with the firearm? Well, did you send it to a competent tester? Did you send it to the FBI? And what did the FBI tell you at that time? I suspect we're not going to get a clear answer. And I also suspect this promise that charges could be refiled, the magic word there is could. Yeah, they could be. We won't see them refiled.
I mean, Danny, it's important to point out that all charges pertaining to this Rust shooting have not been dropped when it comes to the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. Of course, she was Baldwin's co-defendant. What should we expect there, especially because she's expected to testify next month?
Yeah, that's a more viable case because, after all, the armorer had presumably the primary responsibility for ensuring that the firearm was safe or not a firearm. Although, I put an asterisk there because guess who else had some responsibility for that? Presumably, the first assistant director. And do you know what happened with him? Well, they gave him a deal. And that would have been line number 1 of the closing argument for the defense is, here's here's the person with the primary responsibility, and the state gave him a deal. Why? Because their eyes were always on Alec Baldwin, on the superstar, on the celebrity trophy that they could put on their wall. So, again, the state made itself another problem by giving a deal to somebody who probably, likely, had shared in the criminal responsibility, at least under the theory of the state that there even was criminal responsibility. Remember, in the Brandon Lee shooting from, a couple decades ago, this is the kind of thing that happens with a little bit of negligence at each stage of the process. No charges were filed in that case, and arguably no charges should ever have been filed in this case against anyone.
And we know the legal situation is not over for Baldwin yet. There's another lawsuit from Helena Hutchinson's family, her parents, and sister. What happened yesterday, could that have any impact on that part of it?
Not so much. Had it gone to trial, what civil attorneys typically do, including me, is if there's a pending criminal case, you sit back. In fact, you ask to stay all the civil proceedings so you can scoop up all the good information that is uncovered during the criminal trial, because the state has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. A civil case only needs to be proven to a preponderance of the evidence. So there's a strategic benefit to sitting back and waiting for a criminal prosecution. The civil lawyers in that case, while they may be disappointed that the criminal case was dropped, it's still full steam ahead. They have a lot of the information out there in the ether. They're going to be able to do discovery and move their case forward.
All right. Danny, thank you so much for the insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And turning now to Capitol Hill, where the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Dick Durbin, has invited Chief Justice John Roberts to testify in a hearing on Supreme Court ethics. The invitation comes after it was revealed earlier this month that Justice Clarence Thomas received undeclared gifts and luxury travel from a wealthy Republican donor. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now for more on this. Ali, good morning. So first, can you just walk us through what Senator Durbin's invitation says and why he wants Chief Justice Roberts to testify? How unprecedented is this?
Not very unprecedented. At least that's what Senator Durbin says in his letter to Chief Justice Roberts. Now, as of yesterday, our team asked Durbin if he had heard back from Roberts. So far, the answer is no. But to give you a little bit of a sense of why he wants to talk to him, you're right to bring in all of that context about what's going on with Justice Clarence Thomas and the allegations against him in the short term about receiving undeclared gifts from a high-ranking donor, but also prior to that, we talked often about the things that his wife was doing, potentially working alongside key people within the January 6th people who were being investigated by the January 6th committee. And so Thomas has really been one of the focuses here just around judicial ethics broadly. Nevertheless, this is why Durbin says he wants to talk to the Chief Justice, saying that since the last time that the justice addressed ethical issues, there have been a steady stream of revelations regarding justices falling short of ethical standards expected of other federal judges and public servants generally, and that these problems were already apparent back in 2011, but the court's decade-long failure to address them has contributed to a crisis of public confidence, which Durbin says, as the status quo, is no longer tenable. All of this comes as the Senate is mulling whether or not to try to put more restrictions in place regarding ethics reform for the Supreme Court. Hearing from the Chief Justice might just be part and parcel to that.
Yeah, and Ali, I'm glad you read that statement from Durbin, right? Because it's a steady stream. These have been continuous questions around SCOTUS and ethics concerns. Yeah. With this case specifically, though, how likely is it that Chief Justice actually testifies? And if not, would the hearing still go ahead without him?
Look, it's unclear whether or not he'll testify. And as I mentioned, Durbin points out in his letter that this is not unprecedented in terms of an ask of a sitting justice. But I do feel that they'll go forward without him if they don't hear back from him, if he does ultimately decline this invitation. This is a hearing, I think, that in talking to senators in recent months, they are eager to have this conversation about judicial reform broadly. We've seen the court just take such a central focus in Washington and across the country, in large part because of the decision on Dobbs last summer. But since then, there has been just such an extreme conversation in Washington around the role of the courts, around whether or not things are tenable as they are. And from an ethics perspective, that's the central focus here.
And Ali, briefly here, what are Senate Republicans saying about this invitation? They seem a bit skeptical, right?
Yeah, they're skeptical. You look at people like Senator Ted Cruz, another member of the Judiciary Committee, saying in the halls of Congress yesterday that while he does think that ethics and standards are important here, he sees this as just a chance for Democrats to go after justices who they're not in line with politically. That's not what Democrats say, but of course, Republicans going to use this as a way to try to make it political. And look, if this hearing were to go forward, I imagine that kind of posturing is exactly what we would see in the hearing room, not just in the halls of Congress.
You'll keep your eyes on it. Ali Vitale, thank you so much.
Coming up on this hour of Morning News Now, war of words. New York City Mayor Eric Adams now sounding off on the Biden administration over immigration.
Why he's saying the White House's policy on asylum seekers is taking a major economic toll on America's largest city. That's next.
We're back with the growing tensions over migrants being bused to New York City. Mayor Eric Adams now pointing the finger at President Biden, saying the crisis is taking an economic toll on the Big Apple. NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis has more on what the mayor is asking the president to do.
The national government has turned its back on New York City.
The New York City Mayor, Eric Adams, openly reprimanding President Biden, a rare move from a fellow Democrat on the national stage.
Every service in the city is going to be impacted by the asylum seeker crisis.
The mayor saying it's taking an economic toll on the city, having already spent $817 million on housing and services for asylum seekers as of the end of March. And he expects that number to balloon to $1.4 billion by the end of the fiscal year.
He's really walking a tightrope here. He's trying to be pro-immigrant, saying this is helpful for the economy, helpful for the city, trying to slow migration into New York City.
Adams urging the Biden administration for emergency paths, with 200 migrants arriving daily, according to the city's estimates. Adams fears that when Title 42, the Trump-era policy limiting immigration due to COVID, ends next month, the number of immigrants will only accelerate, putting too much strain on the city's budget.
This is in the lap of the President of the United States. The President of the United States can give us the ability to allow people to work.
At the heart of the matter is the number of migrants who rely on New York City services since they cannot legally work. Mayor Adams presented 3 ways the federal government could grant work authorizations to migrants, expanding eligibility criteria for temporary protected status, provide humanitarian parole for asylum seekers at the border and in the United States, and add more U.S. citizenship and immigration officers to help with pending applications. The White House telling our affiliate WNBC FEMA is providing assistance with the migrant crisis in the city, adding it will be announcing additional funding in the coming weeks.
He is saying that this is on the doorstep of the president and that Biden, with the stroke of a pen, could help New York City, could help asylum seekers by giving them work authorization.
It's a rhetoric shift from the mayor, who once pointed the finger at Republican governors for sending migrants to the city, and is now targeting the Biden administration directly. For the past year, he's been asking for federal resources. But now, Mayor Adams says it's a situation that the city can no longer bear.
We have shouldered this course far too long. This is decimating the foundation of our city. It will undermine our city.
Our thanks to Rahima Ellis for that report. City officials say they have received $8 million in aid from state and federal sources so far. Congress has approved an $800 million federal aid package for asylum seekers. However, that will be shared between several cities.
Turning now to go overseas to Sudan, which has been embroiled in a power struggle over the past week between rival generals. Heavy fighting between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces has left hundreds of people dead. But this morning, the leader of the RSF said he's agreed to a 72-hour humanitarian ceasefire, which coincides with today's Al-Eid Fitr Muslim holiday. Meanwhile, the State Department's deputy spokesperson has confirmed the death of one U.S. citizen in Sudan, but did not give any further details. NBC News foreign correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now to break it all down. Good morning, Josh. So we actually heard from the rival army general today, but he did not appear to mention the ceasefire, right? What's going on here? Have hostilities actually stopped this morning?
He didn't mention the ceasefire, but he did mention that he is still committed to ultimately returning Sudan to civilian control. And as far as that ceasefire, it doesn't appear to be holding perfectly. We've seen video emerging of the skyline of Khartoum today after the ceasefire began, with black smoke rising from that city. You can hear gunfire and explosions. So it's unclear as we enter about 8 hours of this ceasefire whether violence has at least reduced compared to the way it was before, but certainly it has not held perfectly, which makes it very complicated for those civilians who are really hiding in their homes at this point to know whether it's safe to get out, to try to evacuate, to try to get medical care and all of the supplies that are so badly needed right now, Zinclay.
Yeah, Josh, and for those unfamiliar, remind us why both sides are fighting and what this all means for Sudan's hopes of transitioning ultimately to a civilian-led government.
So these two armed groups, the Sudanese military and the powerful paramilitary known as the Rapid Support Forces, they had both joined together to basically mount a coup and take control of the country of Sudan just a few years ago. Now, they were supposed to be working toward a plan in which civilians would once again control Sudan, and basically this paramilitary would be absorbed into the official military. But those negotiations appear to have totally broke down, and fighting erupting between those two groups in an epic power struggle that is starting to take on signs of a potential civil war, with both of those armed factions saying they will not stop fighting until the other group really surrenders and goes away.
And Josh, Sudanese airspace has been closed, so obviously it makes it hard or nearly impossible for those trying to escape the conflict to easily flee. I also understand the U.S. is deploying more troops to an East African base in case they need to do emergency evacuations of U.S. citizens from Sudan, especially urgent now that one American has been confirmed dead. So what can you tell us about this plan?
Yeah, well, in fact, that we are hearing reports from a spokesman from the military just this morning that while they say they control the airport, that there are snipers on the roofs of buildings all around the airport. So you can understand how complicated it is to try to evacuate people now. That is why the U.S. is moving troops, additional troops, to a U.S. military base in Camp Lemonnier in nearby Djibouti to do a potential evacuation of the U.S. Embassy and even potentially some of the roughly 16,000 American citizens who are believed to be in the country. As you mentioned, we now have confirmation a U.S. citizen has died. The State Department saying they are in touch with the family of that individual, not releasing any additional information. But it has been a very, very difficult and dangerous mission to try to get Americans out, which is why the U.S. and other countries so far have not begun an actual evacuation attempt.
Yeah, important reporting on the ongoing strife in Sudan. Josh Letterman, thank you so much.
Coming up, shedding light on what prison has been like for Alec Murdaugh.
After the break, we'll bring you the wide-ranging new interview with Murdaugh's own defense attorney on his life behind bars and what's next for the convicted killer. You're watching Morning News Now. We're back now with the latest on the welfare scandal in the state of Mississippi. It's part of the ongoing investigation that's embroiled Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre. Former pro wrestler Jr. has been charged by prosecutors with fraud and theft of federal funds intended for families in need. For more on this, we're joined by NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney. And Ken, good morning. So first off, what do we know about this former pro wrestler's involvement? What exactly is he accused of doing?
Zinclay, good morning. He's accused of accepting millions of dollars in what prosecutors call a conspiracy to defraud the federal welfare program in Mississippi, which was going through state agencies. Some $3 million they describe in this indictment flowing to various entities controlled by Mr. DiBiase, who is the son of a famous wrestler who once went by the moniker $1 Million Man back in the 90s. And many people in this scandal have already pleaded guilty, including the former director of the state welfare agency and the woman who was running the nonprofit who was handing out the money, and they are cooperating. And what's really interesting about this is the implications for another key figure in this scandal, which is former NFL quarterback Brett Favre.
And Ken, what are some of the consequences he could potentially face if he is convicted, and how is his involvement different from Brett's?
Well, it's the same as Favre in the sense that both of them got money that was intended for poor women and children in Mississippi, and they both said that they didn't realize that it was welfare money. Favre has maintained that. Now, Favre has not been charged in this case. DiBiase, on the other hand, is facing a lengthy prison term. He's been charged with theft, fraud, and money laundering. His lawyer said in a statement to NBC News that this was a good day for him because he finally can go to trial and try to clear his name.
And Ken, we know Brett Favre has not been criminally charged in his own investigation. He's previously denied any wrongdoing. So where exactly does the investigation stand right now?
So that's a great question. The only key figures in this whole affair who have not been charged essentially are Brett Favre and the former governor of Mississippi, Phil Bryant. So there is a lot of eyes on both of those men to see where this investigation goes and whether it reaches them. You know, we reported a while ago that the FBI did talk to Brett Favre. That was a while ago. We have no reason to think he's a target right now of the investigation, but the way this thing is moving with federal prosecutors in Mississippi, it looks fairly dangerous for those still involved.
All right, Ken Delanian, thank you so much.
You bet.
This morning, we're getting an inside look at life behind bars for convicted murderer Alec Murdaugh. Murdaugh, who was once a prominent South Carolina lawyer, is now 6 weeks into serving 2 consecutive life terms for killing his wife and youngest son. Now, Murdaugh's lawyer is sharing how his client is doing inside a maximum security prison. It's been just over 6 weeks since former South Carolina attorney Alec Murdaugh became a convicted killer after a jury found him guilty on all charges. Guilty in the fatal shooting of his wife Maggie and son Paul. Now, in a wide-ranging interview, his defense attorney Jim Griffin is providing new details on how Alec is handling life in a maximum security prison.
I mean, he would rather take his chances on the yard than right away in a cell.
Griffin revealing Murdaugh has been living in protective custody, but now wants to be in the general prison population, even after receiving threats from within the prison wall.
You think that he's got a little bit of a death wish?
No, absolutely not. He has been a man who has been sober, and he has been rational, and he plans to continue. He looks forward to the day of getting out of prison.
Murdaugh, who has always maintained his innocence, is currently appealing his murder conviction, and Griffin says he's got support from some who watched the highly publicized trial.
I have here 90 letters from people in over 28 states. 99% of those are folks who watched the trial, who believe in his innocence.
Also on Alec's mind, his only surviving son, Buster. According to Griffin, Buster, who was by his father's side for most of the 6-week-long trial, has not yet seen his father in prison.
He communicates with Buster through letters, and I relay messages to Buster, and so that's been the extent of the communication. Pretty soon, Buster will be able to visit him at the Correctional Institute where he's located, but that hadn't been arranged yet.
Murdaugh is expected to appeal the murder convictions, and those are not his only remaining legal woes. He will still have to answer for the financial crimes he is also accused of, some of which he admitted to during the trial.
Important reporting, Valerie. Thank you so much. And coming up, success, yes, success for SpaceX and NASA, despite an explosive end to yesterday's historic test flight.
Why the massive rocket's mid-flight destruction was actually one giant leap for mankind. That's up next. In today's Climate Challenge series, we'll take a look at the way food waste contributes to the problems of climate change. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson talked with the students who are going above and beyond to make the kinds of changes that experts say can have a serious impact on the planet.
Lunchtime at Hilliard Horizon Elementary, and the cafeteria is a classroom. Students sorting their waste better than adults ever do.
When you get older, are you going to teach your kids how to do this?
Yes.
What's motivating the kids?
I think trying to do the right thing for the planet, for the environment.
Each year, food loss and waste in the U.S. produces emissions equal to the planet-warming carbon dioxide from 42 coal-fired power plants. At a share table, students leave their unopened items for someone else.
People who made those food, they take a lot of time just to make it for us.
This, along with curbside composting, are part of an effort in Central Ohio to cut food waste in half by 2030. The challenge, as you can see, is enormous.
Look at this. Here we have some lettuce, an apple core, onions, everyday food waste that will ultimately end up in landfills. But very quickly, it all adds up.
And food's probably
Joe Lombardi runs the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio.
about 15% of what you see here is going to be food waste in there.
And is that your biggest single item?
It is. It's 1 million pounds a day come into our landfill, just food waste.
Lombardi says an initial effort saw a 21% decrease in food waste after focusing on money as motivation.
It's an economic issue. An individual household of 4 spends almost $2,000 a year on food that is wasted.
So if you can save all this money, why are people so reluctant to do it?
It's just awareness. It is a subject that when you hear food waste, it's kind of icky.
Icky doesn't keep Riley Savage from bringing her lessons home.
Does it make sense to you to do all this work?
I mean, yeah, because it literally takes 2 seconds.
I just put it in the compost.
Connecting the dots for her mom, Jennifer.
What's the most important lesson Riley has taught you?
I think not to compartmentalize things. You know, it's not just about the food, it's just doing what's right.
Making school lessons life lessons. Ann Thompson, NBC News, Columbus, Ohio.
It was a successful liftoff with an explosive ending. This morning, SpaceX is celebrating its first test launch of the most powerful rocket ever built. The massive Starship rocket blasted off yesterday in South Texas, but just minutes into the flight, the rocket experienced what the company calls a rapid unscheduled disassembly. For more, we're joined by Dr. Paul Sutter. He's an astrophysicist and a professor at the Institute for Advanced Computational Science at Stony Brook University. Dr. Sutter, thank you for joining us. All right, so SpaceX says multiple engines did not fire after liftoff and that the rocket was intentionally destroyed by its self-destruct system. What are your takeaways here? Was the test launch actually a success like SpaceX founder Elon Musk is saying?
Of course it was a success, because in science, the only time you fail is when you don't learn something. And the entire point of this test launch was to learn how this rocket performs in flight. And the only way you can really find out is by flying it. And honestly, this rocket is already obsolete. The boosters and engines that they used inside the Super Heavy booster and the Starship were already old. This thing was headed for the scrapyard anyway. And so the decision to get a few minutes of flight data is invaluable for the next iteration.
Yeah, the only time you fail when you don't learn something. I feel like that's something we could all take with us, even if we're not in the space realm. Dr. Sutter, I know this rocket is set to play a key role in NASA's Artemis program. What can NASA learn from yesterday's test launch?
Oh, absolutely. So Artemis requires Starship to work. The entire lunar program that we are developing right now is a partnership between NASA and SpaceX. The Starship that you saw here in this test flight, that Starship is going to be the lunar lander for the Artemis mission. So SpaceX and NASA are working very closely together to understand and study the performance of this vehicle so that Artemis can be on time.
And Dr. Sutter, following the launch, Elon Musk tweeted saying he learned a lot for the next test launch in a few months. That touches on what you said, right? They're just trying to learn from this. What should we be looking for as SpaceX gears up for the moon mission?
We should be looking for a lot more explosions, because this is how you test a rocket. You know, we're so used to NASA when a rocket explodes, everything grinds to a halt. There are congressional inquiries. Everyone tries to figure out what went wrong. That's because NASA has their particular development process. SpaceX has a completely different development process where they are used to blowing up rockets to test them intentionally. There are already multiple Starships in the hangar next to that launch facility ready to go. And so over the next few months, we are going to see more and more test flights. We're going to see more explosions, but every single one we're going to learn more. And eventually we're going to see a complete test flight, including a return of those launch vehicles back to Earth for full reusability.
And Dr. Sutter, I wonder, how common are these kinds of explosions for test launches? And also, I recall earlier this week you told us they were hoping to actually reuse parts of this material. Will they be able to do that now?
Yeah, so this test launch, so explosions are just common. Rocketry is kind of hard. Who knew? But these rockets in particular are designed to be fully reusable. This test launch was not going to be reused. It was just going to be ditched in the ocean at the end of the flight anyway. But after a few more iterations, they hope that both the Super Heavy booster on the bottom and the Starship on top, once they deploy their payload into space, they both return to the Earth. And then you just clean them up and fuel them up again and send them back.
All right. Well, Dr. Sutter, I'm sure we'll talk to you during the next test launch. Thank you so much. And turning now from space to your wallet for your financial headlines. One of Twitter's biggest changes has finally hit the site and may leave you wondering who is the real Beyonce.
Who's anyone on Twitter anymore, right? CNBC's Bertha Coombs joins us now with more. Good morning, Bertha.
Hey, good morning, Valerie and Zinkley. Yeah, I have a naked Twitter profile. I don't know about you, but Twitter began removing those legacy blue check marks from user profiles yesterday. Several well-known people are losing their verified status, including Beyonce, Pope Francis, Bill Gates, Kim Kardashian, and former President Trump. But a few personalities like LeBron James, Stephen King, and William Shatner still have their check marks, even though they complained that they weren't going to pay. Elon Musk tweeting he's paying for those three personally. Shatner made a big fuss about it. Twitter now charges $8 a month for the blue badge and is offering gold checks for businesses, gray for government and government officials. Meantime, Elon Musk's other company, Tesla, is hiking prices on the Model S and Model X. But you'd say to me, wait, didn't they just cut prices on other models? In fact, they've done 6 price cuts this year. But the plaid versions of the Model S and X are going to cost you about $3,000 more, while the price on the base models are rising between 2 and 3%. This after, on Wednesday, CEO Elon Musk doubled down on the price war that he started last year, saying Tesla is going to make sales growth a priority over profits. But I guess not on the Model X. And if you love Big Mac sauce, what we used to call special sauce back in the day, you can now get it on anything. Starting on Thursday, McDonald's is giving out free dipping cups of sauce with any order of Chicken McNuggets or a la carte with any order through the McDonald's app. The deal is for a limited time in a nod to the original blue and silver packaging for the Big Mac. The dipping cup is blue. And by the way, it's not the first time McDonald's has given customers more sauce. Back in 2017, it caused a craze on social media when they gave away 10,000 bottles worth of the sauce. This is all to celebrate its 47th year as a listed company. They IPO'd 47 years ago, and the stock these days is on a tear.
All right. Well, happy birthday to them. Bertha, thank you so much.
Well, it may not be 420 anymore, but coming up, we've got one more pot story for you on this Friday morning.
It's all about getting toned while getting stoned. After the break, we'll take you to one LA fitness club that's matching gains with cannabis strains. Stick around.
We're back with the story of a really chunky kitty who just found his forever home. Meet Patches. He's a gray and white cat living in Virginia, and he weighs a whopping 40 pounds. A Richmond shelter posted about Patches on social media this week, describing him as sweet and gloriously gluttonous, but made it very clear his new owners must help him with a new special diet and exercise plan. And just hours after that first post, the shelter posted a follow-up video saying someone had adopted, quote, all 40 pounds of love. And that poor cat doesn't need to be body shamed, I think, Zinkley.
That's so real. Everyone deserves love, especially that cat. Valerie, thank you so much. Now to a TikTok dance craze. It's called the No Love Challenge, and it features majorette dancing, which dates back to the 1960s and has its roots in historically black colleges and universities. We discovered the story behind the viral clips.
Though it's called the No Love Challenge, this TikTok dance has been receiving a whole lot of love. With nearly 50 million views under the hashtag, it's safe to say these moves have gone viral.
It actually was not planned. I did not plan to prop my phone up and dance.
19-year-old Jordan Williams is the original creator of the challenge, now wildly popular on TikTok.
And I posted it on TikTok, and I'm like, y'all, this is going viral. Like, I was not expecting to do that because it's just like me doing something to uplift me has touched so many souls, including celebrities.
From musicians like Lizzo, Coco Jones, and Tootsie to celebrity influencers like Jada and Des Dior, stars are putting their spin on this trending routine. But Jordan's expression of joy came out of a challenging time.
I was battling through depression my freshman year of college, and after a doctor visit, about my mental health, my doctor recommended me trying things that made me happy. I was having a really bad day. I was just trying to dance myself out of a dark place. I propped the phone up in the bathroom.
Williams chose No Love, a track by her friend J.K. Mack that samples Patti LaBelle's Somebody Loves You, Baby.
I just started dancing. I started feeling better. And I propped the phone up because I wanted to send it to him and show him what I did to his song. Because I'm like, this kind of cute, you know what I'm saying? It's still mind-blowing to me. Like, it's global.
The TikTok trend, just the latest example of majorette dance in the public eye. It's an art form blending jazz, West African, and hip-hop moves originating in the 60s from historically black colleges and universities. Majorette dancing even appearing on Lifetime's TV show Bring It, highlighting a Jackson, Mississippi competitive majorette dance team, the Dancing Dolls.
Majorette culture has just always been a big deal. I just think that, Facebook and TikTok are just now figuring it out. But we've always been here.
Diana Williams, more famously known as Miss D, is head coach of the Dancing Dolls, a group known for their elaborate and creative majorette routines.
I think it's awesome to see it continue to grow like it is, and I hope it never stops.
Miss D, excited the No Love Challenge has brought majorette dance to a whole new generation.
To see me have the impact on others, and shed light on others through something I love to do, that just feels like amazing.
Jordan told me she's excited about her newfound stardom and plans to keep dancing. I definitely think she's inspiring all of us to do the same. And shout out to our producer, Victoria Bell, who pitched this awesome story. I learned a lot about Black history.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Finally, this hour, a new Los Angeles-based exercise class offers an unusual warm-up routine, smoking marijuana.
As NBC News correspondent Nyla Charles explains, it's a new trend that could send your regular gym routine up in smoke.
Rolling a joint or packing a bowl aren't what some of us think of as pre-workout activities, but that's changing, one inhale at a time.
Cannabis and working out is awesome.
Stoned and Toned is a Los Angeles-based online fitness club.
Today I'm smoking lemon tree.
They also host in-person meetups. Morgan English and her husband Mike are the founders.
It takes the anxiety down. It helps my obsessive thoughts just fall away, and then I can focus on the workout. Welcome to Stoned and Toned.
She and the other coaches smoke or vape before, during, and even after taping workout sessions for clients at home.
So I'm gonna take one more. Join me if you want to.
It was weed that got Morgan into fitness in the first place.
I didn't work out before I had cannabis. Drop, lift.
Until college, when she and some friends made a spur-of-the-moment decision mid-high to hit the gym.
And that was kind of when everything shifted for me. It was, wow, I have this chance to move my body. Wow, there's joy here. This is fun. I can't believe 30 minutes just went by.
Now it's an integral part of her workouts and business.
We really encourage microdosing, taking 1 to 2 hits to start, maybe finding that halfway through you need another little one just to kind of kick it back up and get you through the rest of the workout.
Cannabis also helped Morgan get back into fitness after having her now 10-month-old baby.
Everything felt so hard. It was extremely humbling. But with the help of cannabis, I was able to stay on my mat longer, stay committed to the workouts, show up the next day.
When you think about the pharmacology of these products, they kind of work on the same receptors as our natural endorphins that we make when we exercise. And anecdotally, we've heard that it does improve exercise motivation.
A 2019 study by the University of Colorado Boulder found that marijuana smokers were more likely to exercise than others. But Dr. Uche Blackstock says these studies are not definitive and more research needs to be done.
Engage the course.
For Morgan, marijuana has helped keep her moving and parenting.
If you are able to, as a mom, find that safe space and that time to go take a puff or two and move your body or meditate, bring it in. That will really help ground you and just lift you up in a way that maybe you wouldn't expect.
Nyla Charles, NBC News.
I don't think that's for me.
To each their own. To each their own.
Exactly. Well, that does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now. Good Friday morning. I'm Zinklea Samoa.
And I'm Valerie Castro. Joe and Savannah are on assignment. Right now on Morning News Now, at risk. This morning, millions of Americans are facing severe weather threats. From the south to the Midwest, people are dealing with flash flooding, heavy winds, and even deadly tornadoes. We're in one of the hardest hit places with how recovery efforts look this morning. Plus, meteorologist Angie Lassman is tracking how all of this will impact your weekend. Making it official. After months of speculation, President Biden is expected to launch his re-election bid. Sources tell NBC News that announcement could come as early as next week. What we're learning about his campaign launch and his push for another 4 years in office. Plus, successful mission. That's what SpaceX is now calling its latest launch, despite the rocket exploding minutes into the flight. Why experts say this mission is still one giant leap for mankind. Also this morning, can't miss. No plans this weekend? Well, no problem. We've got your can't miss list, including a new show that critics say is like nothing else on television. We'll show you why and the other shows and movies you need to catch later this hour.
It's been a long week. I am ready to unwind some of that.
Happy Friday.
Yes.
Well, this morning, people in Oklahoma are still trying to assess the extensive damage left behind after storms and tornadoes hit the state.
Yeah, 3 people are dead and dozens more injured. Towns like Cole and Shawnee are seeing the worst damage, with homes left in shambles and trees and power lines knocked down. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck is in Cole this morning with the latest.
Well, good morning. We are seeing so many homes in the area that look like this one, without walls, without a roof, just leveled by this EF3 tornado that swept through. We're also hearing incredible stories of survival from the families that live here, like the family that was in this house and narrowly escaped to safety just 15 minutes before this tornado touched down. But now, after all of this loss, the hard work is just beginning. In Cole, Oklahoma, a community coming together to clean up a town left in pieces after what the National Weather Service is calling an EF3 twister tore through the area.
I've lived here for 18 years, and not once have we gotten this close to a tornado hitting us.
As the recovery begins, severe spring weather sweeping its way across the country, impacting tens of millions in the South and the Midwest, with brutal conditions heading east. Strong winds and ping-pong ball-sized hail slamming parts of Illinois. In Texas, dark skies, a reported tornado touching down in Tyler. And pounding rain causing dangerous flash flooding, leading to stalled cars and multiple water rescues in the Austin area.
That water came up to here, and you were just like trying to crawl out the window.
People was getting out of their car swimming, so it was pretty bad.
In Arkansas, a downpour drenching the stage at the Backwoods Music Festival. Back in Cole, the town still reeling. Scott and Debbie Curry held each other close as the storm's strength nearly swept them apart.
My main thing was hanging on to her hand, not letting her go, because if I let her go, I think she'd have gone.
The couple and their 4 dogs trapped in their home as the tornado took aim.
I couldn't even get off the kitchen floor because I felt like if I stood up, I'd gonna get sucked out. I thought we were both gonna get sucked out.
Now, neighbors and friends coming together and trying to rebuild what was lost.
And we just held on and prayed. It's the scariest thing I've ever been in.
And a little good news on the horizon for folks here today. The threat of severe weather seems to have passed, so that should help cleanup efforts significantly. We're told the top priority will be restoring power to this area and finding permanent housing for those who can no longer sleep at home. Back to you.
Katie Beck, thanks so much.
Time now for a check at your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now with the forecast. Good morning, Angie.
Good morning, ladies. And Katie's exactly right. Parts of Oklahoma are looking much drier, much nicer, much quieter today, so it'll be good for cleanup as far as the weather is concerned. But that line of storms has shifted just a little to the east. Now, another good piece of information for you to note, if you are dealing with the rain, that's going to be about it. We'll, of course, have the potential for some flooding concerns with that heavy rain. But the severe weather threat is way down from where we were yesterday. We'll see it get back into the picture for tomorrow. But in the meantime, we're looking at really just kind of some heavy rain that causes it to be a little difficult out on the roadways and potentially some river flooding. So we'll be watching for that. Plenty of lightning associated with this line just to the south of places like Houston, working into parts of the Gulf of Mexico, stretching up into Memphis, though, and even into the Ohio Valley. We likely will see some heavy rain working through. These are the spots that you're going to want to watch for the potential for some flooding. Those rainfall rates could reach up to 1 inch per hour, so it won't be hard to see some of that that flooding occurring. Now, meanwhile, we're going to eventually start to see that line work into the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and eventually New England here as we get into the weekend. And through Sunday, we could pick up maybe an inch or even 2 inches of rain in some of these spots. We really need it across much of the Northeast, so it'll be some welcome rain. You might notice your grass is a little brown. If you live in this area, there will be a bit of relief when it comes to that. Here's the severe weather potential through the day today. It's fairly low. We'll still have the potential, though, to see some gusty winds, maybe 60 miles per hour or even up to an inch of hail, but the tornado threat is much lower. Even tomorrow, just a brief tornado is possible. It'll be more so we're watching for the damaging wind or the hail, but up to an inch or larger, so just watch for that if you live on the East Coast, places like the Carolinas and into the Southeast. Meanwhile, the Northeast, quite warm, 89 degrees, guys, in Washington, D.C. Don't get used to it. Cooler air is on the way, and it'll become seasonable by the time next week rolls around.
Ooh, I'm in D.C. this weekend, so can't wait for that.
Break out the shorts and T-shirt.
Angie Lasman, thank you. And now to that major 2024 campaign announcement expected from President Biden next week. Sources confirming to NBC News that President Biden will launch his re-election campaign. And they say that update could come as early as Tuesday, April 25th, the anniversary of Biden's 2020 campaign announcement. NBC News chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander joins us now from the White House to dig into this. Peter, good morning. So first, what are we expecting from the president's announcement?
Yeah, Zinkla, you laid it out well. We are expecting him to make a re-election run official. That campaign video announcement could come, as you note, as soon as Tuesday. That's according to 3 sources familiar with the plans. Tuesday's been circled on the calendar here for a while because it is the anniversary of the announcement he made before running back in 2020. Of course, nothing is final until the president says the word, but it's notable that he has his work cut out for him right now. His approval ratings are hovering in the low to mid 40s. Even some Democrats have expressed concerns about the 80-year-old seeking a second term. He'd be 86 when his second term was winding down. The bottom line announcing now, it does allow President Biden to start raising money for what is expected to be a long and bitter campaign, gives him about a year and a half to do so. It obviously also prepares him for a possible rematch against former President Trump. Sinclair.
Peter, you talked about the president's approval ratings. Of course, the big question for Democrats is, will he be the right competitor? What do the latest numbers show on how President Biden would fare against potential Republican candidates?
Yeah, let's show you the state of the race right now as things get started this spring. That means we have a very long way to go. Remember that. But the new polling comes this morning to us from the Wall Street Journal. It shows President Biden leads former President Trump by 3 points. You see it there, 48 to 45. That is among registered voters nationwide. But look at this. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, another potential challenger. He hasn't announced anything yet. His poll numbers show him ahead of President Biden by that same margin, 48 to 45. Both of these pretty close to the margin of error. But it's significant that DeSantis really does face an uphill climb within his own party as we speak. He's running 13 points behind former President Trump among likely GOP voters. Take a look at what's going on in Florida alone. Among Florida Republican House members, 9 of them to this point have or preparing to endorse former President Trump. Just 1 for the Republican governor of their state right now, Ron DeSantis. And Clay.
All right, Peter Alexander outside the White House. Thank you so much.
There are new developments this morning in the investigation surrounding President Biden's son, Hunter.
Yeah, details are emerging on the criminal charges he could face, and the FBI agent now seeking whistleblower protections. NBC News Now anchor Hallie Jackson has the latest.
Hey there, I'm told the process is moving forward with that career IRS agent, with some members of Congress now in conversations with his attorney about the whistleblower protections he wants. Some lawmakers say they want to know what this agent has to say, as we're learning more about the potential charges Hunter Biden could face. New reaction this morning to the allegation the president's son is getting preferential treatment in the criminal investigation against him, with an IRS special agent sending a letter to Congress asking for whistleblower protection for his work in a high-profile case. His attorney won't confirm which one, but a source familiar with the matter tells NBC News it is the Hunter Biden investigation.
He's somebody who would really regret if he just stayed silent and did nothing. And so he doesn't want to live his life that way.
Why should people believe that your client is not motivated by political considerations in coming forward here?
In terms of credibility, he's willing to be cross-examined. He's willing to be tested. He has documents that support some of the assertions he wants to make.
The agent has allegedly seen clear conflicts of interest and preferential treatment and politics improperly infecting decisions. NBC News has learned federal prosecutors have considered potential criminal charges against the president's son. 3 tax crimes, and a charge related to a gun purchase, according to 2 sources familiar with the matter. Hunter Biden has said a review would show he handled his affairs legally and appropriately. No charges have been brought. Last month, the Attorney General making this pledge about the Hunter Biden case, overseen by a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in Delaware.
He's not restricted in his investigation in any way.
Republicans taking aim at the Biden administration.
We surely are curious to see if this is being slow-walked.
No comment from the Justice Department or the IRS, but the White House says the president is keeping an appropriate distance.
He believes in the rule of law. He believes in the independence of the Justice Department.
Hunter Biden raising his public profile recently, even in the face of GOP-led investigations against him. In Ireland with his father earlier this month.
I'm proud of you.
Hunter Biden's attorney telling NBC News it appears this IRS agent has committed a crime by sharing private tax information and had denied my client protections that are his right. Multiple sources tell NBC News that the bulk of the work on this case was done about a year ago, which raises the question of timeline, right? Why now? Why is this agent coming forward and looking for this protection now? The agent's attorney tells me he had seen testimony fairly recently from a senior political appointee that contradicted what the agent felt was actually happening in the case. He would not confirm who that senior official is. Now, for legal reasons, there's a lot they say has to be somewhat cryptic. It is worth noting that that testimony from Attorney General Merrick Garland we showed you in that story where he said the U.S. attorney overseeing the case is not restricted in any way, that happened about a month ago. Back to you.
Hallie, thank you.
House Republicans have now passed a bill that would ban transgender girls from competing in female athletics. The Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act takes aim at government funding. It would ban schools that allowed transgender athletes to compete from receiving federal money for education. The bill passed on party lines with no support from House Democrats. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy had this to say during a press conference following the vote.
I would say we know them, we understand them. It doesn't have to do with it. What it plays is this is athletics. So we can understand the other person. We can go to dinner with the other person. We can hang out with the other person. But there's a reason why Title IX was created. There's a reason why there's men and women's sports. There's a reason why there's a professional basketball for men and women. It's about fairness.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now for more. Ali, good morning. So walk us through what happens to this bill now. How have Democrats responded to it, and can we expect to see it make any progress in the Senate?
The short answer here, no, it's not going anywhere in the Senate. And so for Republicans, the fact that they were able to pass this is important from a messaging perspective because it allows Speaker McCarthy to go out on the steps of the Capitol and trumpet the kind of wins on culture wars that are doing so well for his members back home. These are the sorts of messages in tandem with other pieces like education platforms that they've passed in recent weeks that they hope to continue growing their majority by in 2024. We've seen the way that it plays with the grassroots, and that's partly why they're prioritizing it so much with their slim majority here in Congress. Nevertheless, unsurprising, Democrats are squarely against this bill, but they know that it's going nowhere in the Senate too. Chuck Schumer reiterated this yesterday, and of course, even if it went anywhere in the Senate, which the numbers are not there because Democrats control that chamber, President Biden, of course, would never sign a bill like this.
As you just said, President Biden said he would be vetoing this bill if it did make it to his desk. So why did Republicans go ahead knowing it would likely not be passed?
Again, it's because these issues do so well with the grassroots of their party. You have to also remember here that as much as they're trying to exercise their majority in the off year before we get into presidential politics officially, although I know we're squarely there as well, this is something that will continue to parlay into 2024 once the presidential race really heats up. It's something that we're already watching Republican presidential contenders say and speak to a lot on the campaign trail. And it also, for the Biden administration, provides them a consistent foil on these sorts of culture war issues that we've seen do so well on the Republican base and for the Democratic base for opposite reasons. So it really does provide a political wedge in addition to speaking to the red meat that conservatives really wanted to see from this House Republican majority.
And the bill takes direct aim at Title IX. Of course, that's the law that prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school that receives funding from the federal government. Is that law now at risk? Is the Education Department taking steps to amend Title IX in response to the growing number of bans?
Yeah, they're making tweaks to it in response to 20 or so states that are putting in place these blanket bans of trans girls playing sports. And they're doing so by saying that in order to make these kinds of restrictions, they have to do so based on two standards. You can't just say blanketly across the board that trans girls can't play sports. And this changes the older that folks get. In elementary school, the rules might look different than they do in high school, and then certainly at more elite levels of the games. But what they're saying is the two standards that have to be met is, one, it has to meet important educational objectives, and two, it has to minimize the harm to the people who are not allowed to play those sports. Now, educational objectives that are deemed important do not include disagreeing with being trans. Instead, it might be things more like preventing sports-related injuries or fairness in the game. So the education department wading into this as we see more states across the country putting in place their own restrictions here, but nevertheless, it gets into a really new legal territory, and you got to imagine that we're going to see some legal challenges to this as both sides try to make changes.
Okay, Ali Vitale, thank you so much.
And coming up, an Oklahoma official resigns after a newspaper says he was recorded making racist comments. Now we're learning more about his comments and similar ones reportedly made by his colleagues. The latest on that and the growing calls for more people to resign next.
Also this morning, the SpaceX rocket exploded minutes after liftoff, but they're still calling the mission a success. We'll explain why in just a few minutes. You're watching Morning News Now.
We're back now with more fallout around that shocking audio recording of Oklahoma County officials, which appears to contain racist and violent language. An Oklahoma newspaper says it secretly recorded them. NBC News correspondent Stephen Romo has the latest.
A small-town, family-run newspaper at the center of a firestorm. Protesters lining up in McCurtain County, Oklahoma, demanding the resignation of the sheriff and two other officials after audio excerpts of racist and violent remarks they allegedly made went public. Now, the McCurtain Gazette-News releasing what it says is the entire recording. NBC News has not independently verified its authenticity. At one point, the people on the tape appear to discuss ramming a tank into the paper's office.
What you need to do, I'm going to go with Cody. I'm going to buy one of the more wore-out tanks. It's got a bad, let's see, it have a bad steering clutch on the left. And we're going to go about 30 miles through town, and when it go right through that stop sign, just make a detour right through GI and right through the... You'll have to beat my son to it. Because he's already got a bright idea. He's going to put rip right in the front door.
District Commissioner Mark Jennings, also allegedly heard on that tape, resigned after the first audio clips were released. But the others, Sheriff Kevin Clarity, Sheriff's Office Investigator Alicia Manning, and Jail Administrator Larry Hendricks, not stepping down. The newspaper's editor, Bruce Willingham, says he secretly recorded them during a conversation on March 6th by leaving a recording device in commissioners' chambers after a public meeting. Willingham runs the paper with his son.
They initially started out talking about various people that might beat us or wanted to beat us.
The newspaper had run a series of stories critical of county officials.
I don't think I can contain myself.
Oh, you're talking about you can't control yourself.
Yeah, I'm not worried about what he's going to do to me. I'm worried about what I might do to him. They bring
Don't say it. You know, goes around. It will. I told you it will. Yeah. I know where two big deep holes are if you ever need it. I got an excavator. These are like pre-dug.
None of the four officials allegedly involved have responded to NBC News' requests for comment, but the sheriff's office did post on Facebook calling the recording illegally obtained and saying the clips released had been altered, something attorneys for the paper deny. When the first excerpts were released, the community igniting in anger over the offensive and racist comments.
It was back in the day when take a damn blackjack, whoop their ass and throw them in the cell, I'd run for sheriff. Yeah. Well, it's not like that no more. I know. We're taking them down here on Mud Creek and hang them up with the damn rope. Yeah. But you can't do that. The thing about it is, they got more rights than we got.
Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt now calling for the sheriff and council members to be removed. The mayor of Idabel, the county seat, echoing those calls.
You hear a story where they're talking about killing the newspaper man and how hanging folks and putting them in the creek and folks of color. And this is not the 1920s. This is the 2020s.
Now, just to give you a picture of this, it was actually 3 hours and 37 minutes in this recording. Some of the discussion was mundane, but as you heard, some of it racist and vile. There were also some threats of violence, apparently, against the district attorney in this area. Again, NBC News has not been able to independently verify this, but the newspaper's editor says that he's sent this recording to the FBI. We also know the governor is calling on the OSBI, Oklahoma's Bureau of Investigation, to look into this as well. So more fallout from this is possible. Back to you.
Disturbing stuff. Stephen, thank you so much.
New this morning, Britain's Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab has resigned following an independent investigation into allegations of bullying. The report upheld 2 claims that Raab bullied colleagues, saying he acted in a, quote, intimidating and insulting manner. Raab said the findings set a, quote, dangerous precedent for the conduct of good government. Raab is the 3rd senior minister to leave over personal conduct in the last 6 months. His resignation is seen as a blow to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who last year vowed to bring integrity back to the government. Now to headlines from around the world with the latest from Sudan. A 72-hour ceasefire has been agreed to by the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary to coincide with the Eid al-Fitr holiday.
NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now from Tel Aviv with that and other breaking news. Good morning, Josh.
Hey, good morning. We're about 3 hours, actually more closer to 8 hours at this point, into that 3-day ceasefire. And already we are starting to see that it's not totally holding. Black smoke visible on video feeds coming from Khartoum. There can hear sounds of explosions and gunfire. And this morning, the State Department has confirmed that a U.S. citizen was killed in Sudan. This coming as the U.S. moves more troops to nearby Djibouti to be ready to potentially evacuate the U.S. embassy there. Now to Russia, where the Russian Air Force has accidentally bombed one of its own cities. The bomb was dropped on Belgorod, which is a city near the Ukrainian border that Ukrainian drones have attacked before. And so the initial speculation was that this might have been a Ukrainian attack. But now Russia's military says it was a, quote, emergency release of air ordnance by its own jet. And meanwhile, it created a 66-foot crater in the ground and injured at least 2 people. And finally to Chad, where a lion species is believed to have died out in the region, but now is saying not so fast. An adult female lion was spotted by a remote camera in Sena Ora National Park, the first sighting of the big cats since 2004. Heavy poaching has depleted the population there, but now conservationists say this is hugely encouraging, and they say it's a sign that efforts to protect these endangered species are improving. Back to you.
So cool that it's back. We hope that it stays safe.
Josh, thanks so much. SpaceX is already looking ahead to its next launch after a test flight for its massive Starship rocket ended with a high-altitude explosion. And while the flight didn't go exactly as planned, both SpaceX and NASA appear to be touting its success. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello is in Washington and is here to explain why. Good morning, Tom.
Explosion? No, 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 no. It was an unscheduled rapid disassembly, you guys. Unscheduled rapid disassembly. And listen, despite that fiery conclusion, SpaceX and the head of NASA say this is a step in the right direction. The company's rocket made it to an altitude of about 24 miles up. But SpaceX needs to travel a lot further with this rocket to play a critical role in getting humans back to the moon and then beyond.
Off the pad and clearing the tower for the first time ever.
Booster upper chamber pressure is nominal.
SpaceX's Starship, the largest, most powerful rocket ever built, soared over the Gulf Coast. Crowds cheering on Thursday's critical test flight.
What a sight from the ground cameras at Starbase.
But just a few minutes in, it quickly became apparent something was wrong. The rocket failed to make it to the second stage.
We should have had separation by now. Obviously, this is does not appear to be a nominal situation.
And within moments, a massive sky-high explosion.
Starship just experienced what we call a rapid unscheduled disassembly.
An exciting end to the Starship inaugural integrated test flight.
SpaceX says the craft experienced multiple engines out, and SpaceX activated the flight termination system, self-destruct, to both booster and ship. In a statement, the company says it has learned a tremendous amount about the vehicle and the ground systems that will help us improve on future flights, something Elon Musk suggested could happen in a few months. Back in 2021, Musk talked to me about his hope for Starship.
We need to get Starship operational in order to have a base on the moon and be able to send people to Mars.
Musk, who would like to see a colony set up on Mars, says taking humans to another planet is the ultimate goal. Watching all of it closely, NASA, which hopes to send 4 astronauts on a lunar orbit next year on a different rocket. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson says the rocket tested Thursday would deliver Starship to lunar orbit, where within the next few years, a crew would rendezvous with that rocket and go onto a SpaceX lander, putting the first woman and next man on the moon's surface. Nelson called Thursday's test flight a success.
Some things didn't work. They'll correct that. They have a new, more sophisticated rocket in a couple of months. They'll launch and they'll be successful.
They will be successful. They've got a good track record overall, right? So NASA says, Nelson says, nothing about this launch and the explosion, nothing of that changes NASA's timeline. It wants to have astronauts on the moon by late 2025 or early 26. We'll see. It also hopes to have a human set foot on Mars by 2040, 17 years away. SpaceX, by the way, is not the only company in this game, right, on the private partnership with the government. And NASA says this is the way it's going to be if you're going to get back to the moon and onto Mars, ladies.
In 17 years, that's not so long in space time.
Not so bad, right? No.
Tom, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.
And coming up, Alec Baldwin is no longer facing charges in the deadly Rust movie set shooting. Why prosecutors are not moving forward with the charges, and who is still facing punishment for the death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins.
Plus, it's something you might encounter today. Potholes, they're becoming more and more common and taking a toll on our cars and wallets. So what's causing the big sink? We'll explain next. We're back with some major legal news out of New Mexico. Actor Alec Baldwin will no longer be prosecuted in the death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Prosecutors in the case announcing yesterday that new facts in the case led to Baldwin's charges being dropped. The decision now clears the actor of criminal charges. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer has the latest.
The DA's office had reviewed the evidence for the last 6 months, but since announcing charges, the case against Alec Baldwin has seemingly unraveled. The special prosecutor stepped down and a series of gun enhancement charges was dropped. Now new prosecutors who just took over the case, citing new revelations, have decided to drop all charges. That's expected to officially happen in court later today.
The stunning announcement comes 18 months after Alec Baldwin was involved in the fatal shooting of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. The actor will now no longer face involuntary manslaughter charges. The special prosecutors saying in a statement overnight, new facts were revealed that demand further investigation and forensic analysis in the case. Consequently, we cannot proceed under the current time constraints and on the facts and evidence turned over by law enforcement in its existing form.
You believe Alec Baldwin pulled the trigger?
Yes.
The shocking reversal comes just months after the former special prosecutor and the DA told us they were certain they could convict Baldwin before both stepped away from the case. A source with knowledge of the investigation says as new attorneys took over, they learned the revolver used by Baldwin had been modified with a new trigger, making it possible to misfire, as the actor had said.
And then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
Reacting to the news, Baldwin's attorneys wrote, "We are pleased with the decision to dismiss the case. The new developments come after the actor settled a civil lawsuit with Hutchins' husband, who sat down exclusively with Hoda."
The idea that the person holding the gun, causing it to discharge, is not responsible is absurd to me.
Thursday's legal drama all unfolded on the same day Rust resumed production, this time at Montana's Yellowstone Film Ranch. This week, Baldwin filmed leaving his home in New York, kissing his wife goodbye with film crew in tow, and then arriving in Bozeman. Hours later, word broke while Baldwin was on his new set, he would not face criminal charges. On Instagram, the actor posting this photo, writing, "I owe everything I have to this woman."
In their statement, special prosecutors said the decision to drop charges doesn't absolve Alec Baldwin of criminal culpability, and charges could be refiled later. The new status hearing in this case, where charges should formally be dropped, is expected later on this afternoon. As for Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the film's 25-year-old armorer, her attorney tells us she still faces a charge of involuntary manslaughter. Back to you.
Miguel, thanks so much.
All right, you most likely can't get through your morning commute without having to avoid at least one pothole. And you're not alone. Potholes in cities across the country are taking a big toll on drivers' tires and wallets. Here's NBC News contributing correspondent Kaylee Hartung.
Hey there, that's right. And this is not just an LA problem. One recent report found that 40% of U.S. roadways are in poor or mediocre condition. So what's causing the big sink? Well, wetter winters and more traffic mean more potholes, and local crews are struggling to keep up with the demand to fill them. If you're hitting the road this weekend, buckle up. It might be a bumpy ride. Across the country, potholes seem to be popping up faster than crews can fill them.
Because of all of the rain that so many parts of the country experienced, the potholes have just proliferated in many parts of the country.
Former California governor and actor Arnold Schwarzenegger recently took matters into his own hands, terminating what he called a giant pothole in his Los Angeles neighborhood.
For 3 weeks I've been waiting for this hole to be closed.
The video going viral, but the city claiming it was actually a trench for utility work. Thank you. The potholes and rough roads in LA are just one example of a bigger problem across the country. Last year, about 44 million drivers, they had to pay for repairs on their cars because of pothole damage. And it can take a big chunk out of drivers' pockets. The average cost of repairs, over $400, according to AAA.
It could cost much more depending on the type of damage that was done and the type of vehicle that was damaged.
Potholes are caused when water seeps into cracks in asphalt. As cars drive over the weakened surface, it eventually caves under pressure.
Water is the kryptonite of asphalt. And so obviously with a series of rain events, this has just become a really bad situation for our roadways.
Torrential rain and heavy snow across the country this winter, plus overcrowded roads, causing pothole reports to soar and putting a major strain on city and state resources as crews race to patch the problems. After a brutal winter, Salt Lake City held its first ever pothole palooza last week, filling more than 6,000 holes. In Chicago, the Department of Transportation says they're working every day, including weekends in winter and spring, which they've dubbed pothole season, to fix damaged roads. Some local governments are now looking for more funding to keep up with maintenance. The mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota, pushing for a 1% hike to the local sales tax, aiming to raise $1 billion to pay for transportation fixes, including pothole-ridden road repairs, as drivers hope for smoother journeys ahead. So what can we do to protect our cars from damage? Well, first, take precautions. Make sure your tires are properly inflated. And while driving, keep your eyes on the road and scan for potholes. If you see one, make sure you don't swerve dangerously into another car to avoid them. Sometimes the safest thing to do is slow down while rolling over them. And a lot of cities like Los Angeles and Chicago are asking us to act when you see a pothole, not by filling it yourself like we saw Arnold Schwarzenegger do, but by calling 311 and reporting the pothole so the city can come and fix it. Back to you.
Kaylee Hartung, thank you so much.
Coming up, a lot of us use some kind of cloud or storage service to save our photos.
Yeah, but instead of safekeeping them, it could be putting your snapshots at risk. We'll show you why and how to keep your photos to yourself next. Welcome back. Well, how would you feel if all of the photos you hold near and dear were suddenly erased? That's exactly what happened to some Shutterfly customers thanks to a new company policy. We're taking a closer look at how those photos are stored and ways to protect them from being deleted. And right now, we're joined by NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda to break this all down and give us some tips and tricks.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I mean, you think those photos, they mark the most important milestones of your life. Graduation, a baby's first steps, maybe moments with a loved one who has since passed. But what if all of those precious pictures, as you pointed out, are suddenly gone? That is what happened to some Shutterfly users after a policy change earlier this year. Now, fortunately for these devastated customers, there is a happy ending to the photo frenzy.
Some memories you want to hold on to a little longer.
It's the photo printing and archiving site that's been around for nearly 25 years. But this morning, Shutterfly is trying to win back customers after a recent change to its free unlimited storage made some users shudder.
I am livid, like beyond livid.
Earlier this year, Shutterfly announced it would be wiping accounts that hadn't made a purchase in the last year and a half from its servers, including all of those customers' stored photos.
It feels like a death because everything is on there.
Shutterfly says it repeatedly emailed customers alerting them to the March deadline. But some users, like Jody Hahn, who has leaned on the photo site for 2 decades, missed the heads up. And despite calling a dozen Shutterfly representatives, was told the deletion process was completed.
It's just all gone. And every time, as these days go on, I just remember little things that are on there.
On social media, users calling Shutterfly absolutely heartless and comparing the loss of pictures to a house fire, writing, "I cannot stop crying." An uproar loud enough to catch the company's attention, which just announced to provide our customers even more time to access their photos and either make a purchase to keep their account active or download them to a personal device. We are restoring access to those photos for all customers and have extended the deadline to take action to May 30th. Our NBC station in Boston breaking the news to Han.
They're going to restore your photos.
You're kidding.
Tech experts say Shutterfly's photo frenzy serves as an important reminder in this increasingly digital age to always have a backup.
What's at stake here is that your most precious memories could be deleted permanently. And that's why I think it's good to make sure you have a plan B.
Wow, Emily, I mean, we heard that experts say it's important to have a plan B. What does that actually look like, though?
So there are a couple of different ways that you can build the redundancy. First and foremost, consider getting an external drive. There are solid-state drives, and they make them in portable fashion. And those have really fast transferring speed, so they're a good option. And they've become increasingly affordable in recent years. Also, subscribe to more than one cloud service. So think Google Photos, Amazon Photos, and oftentimes you can get a certain amount of space for free. So there's not an extra added cost in some cases. Thirdly, and this is a really important one, you want to make unique passwords for your photo accounts. We say this all the time because if there is a data breach, if your password does become compromised, you don't want then your other accounts to be at risk as well.
Those are really important tips, especially for precious memories.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Emily Ikeda, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
And for just the second time in the past half century, a Major League Baseball team could be on the move to a new city. The Oakland Athletics have signed a binding agreement to buy 49 acres of land for a new ballpark in Las Vegas. The A's say the new stadium will be built near the Las Vegas Strip. The team plans to make the move in time for the 2027 season.
For more on this, we're joined by USA Today MLB reporter Gabe Locks. Gabe, good morning. The A's have been in Oakland since 1968, where they have played at the aging Oakland Coliseum. So how did we get to this point, and why Las Vegas?
Yeah, why Las Vegas can simply be answered by it's a more favorable political climate to get a deal done. The A's have been searching for a new ballpark in Oakland for about a quarter century, and you've seen a lot of sites floated from Fremont to San Jose to at least 3 sites in the city of Oakland. Really wanted to stay there, probably still do want to stay there, but they have a few $100 million shortfall in funding that they want the city to pay for public funds to pay for infrastructure, and they think that they can get that with a brand new stadium in Las Vegas. I think they do this somewhat reluctantly, but basically the state of play for getting $500 million, which is what they'll need in public funding from Nevada, should be theoretically an easier process than it was in Oakland. So that was kind of the the thing that propelled this thing to where we are right now.
Yeah, all right. So new digs for them. And Gabe, I imagine moving an entire sports franchise is not easy. So what needs to happen next?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the legislative process begins now. And it's an interesting timeline. There's only 6 weeks remaining in the state of Nevada's legislative session, which is a bit of a tight deadline to hammer out such a complex deal. Now, when they lured the Raiders a few years ago, the state did call a special session of the legislature to get a deal done. So they don't necessarily have a 6-week deadline, but they do need to move pretty quickly and get those funds approved and all the stuff that comes with it. Governor Joe Lombardo has been, shall we say, cautious, maybe a little tentative. You know, there's a lot of bells and whistles, probably a lot of green and gold balloons going up over the strip, excitement over the thought of Major League Baseball coming to Las Vegas. But now the hard part begins, the part where they ran into a wall in Oakland, and that's going to be convincing legislators to float $500 million in public bonds that won't even start to be paid off for another 30 years. So that's the tricky part. They're going to try to sell the city on economic impact. And the thing with Las Vegas, it's what they do there. They build massive stadiums. They spend millions and billions of dollars on facilities for world-class events. And baseball would be joining the NHL and the NFL there. So there's precedent to get a deal done. Now the hard part begins.
All right, Gabe, thanks for breaking it down for us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it. Thank you.
And coming up, there's a different kind of baby boom happening in England.
And it involves some of the world's rarest animals. We'll take you inside one zoo's mission to prevent these animals from facing extinction next.
We're back now with today's Good Talker. Vogue is celebrating trailblazers with disabilities in its newest British edition. The magazine's May edition features 5 activists, models, and creatives with disabilities on its covers. The issue, titled Reframing Fashion, includes sign language performer Justina Miles, actor Selma Blair, and activist Sinead Burke. Inside the issue, more than a dozen more talented individuals are featured, and British Vogue's editor said, quote, making this issue was a necessary and overdue education for all. Now, Valerie, it is important to note that they are not the first magazine to do this. Teen Vogue actually did it back in 2018 and Glamour years ago as well, but we love to see that kind of progress.
Love to see the inclusivity. It's so important. Thank you, Zinkley.
Yeah.
A zoo in northern England is on a mission to prevent extinction. Chester Zoo is seeing a special kind of baby boom and announcing the arrival of newborns in rare species like Sumatran tigers and western chimpanzees. NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobiea gives us a peek inside.
Guys, good morning. Well, take a look at this. That is Asha, a greater one-horned rhino, and her 6-month-old baby. She was born in October of last year, part of this zoo, Chester Zoo's rare and endangered animal baby boom.
Playtime for 2 of the world's rarest big cats. They're Sumatran tiger cubs, critically endangered, with only 350 in the wild. Alif and Raya were born in January, both healthy females. The cubs among 12 endangered species born at Chester Zoo in the past 9 months, including a Malayan tapir, a western chimpanzee, a greater one-horned rhino, a giant anteater, and this little guy, born last summer and just now showing his face. Tucked inside mom's pouch is a baby Goodfellow's tree kangaroo, a joey. You can see the joey. Unlike their much bigger Australian cousins, these animals spend their entire lives in the trees.
They're only found in New Guinea, and numbers have dropped alarmingly in recent years.
The zoo didn't know Katawa had given birth until her pouch moved.
When it's born, it's the size of a jelly bean?
It's tiny, yeah, jelly bean, that's right, yeah. Mum will lick a path up for it to climb up to the pouch, and it'll latch onto a teat and slowly grow. We've managed to get a boroscope in and actually film it in the early days in the pouch. And they're sort of rather grotesque-looking little pink things with claws.
Matching animals, like the endangered Komodo dragon, the world's largest venomous lizard, with new mates can be dangerous.
When dragons come together, you don't quite know how it's going to go. If they're not compatible, certainly with a size difference between this huge lizard that's having a bath now, his size difference was of some concern.
But just 2 weeks ago, baby Komodo dragons came out of their shells. A little over 12 inches long, they'll reach adulthood in 8 or 9 years.
On that special day, one pipped, I could see the scales of a dragon. A highlight of my career, so special.
You knew that you had...
You
knew you had healthy babies.
Yeah.
In the lab, the zoo regularly checks animal hormone levels for signs they're healthy and ready to breed, working to breed and protect creatures big and small. The nonprofit zoo works with more than 20 countries around the globe, collaborating with local communities to find the best ways to monitor species and protect their environments. And these recent arrivals are snails from Madeira off the coast of Africa, long thought to be extinct, but a few were discovered and delivered to the care of Chester Zoo just last week.
We got a call and say, yeah, we found 20. So 20 snails, and they just say, right, we'll send it to you, try to do it the best that you can, because that's the last hope that we have it until the habitat is restored and is in good conditions.
Hoping top scientists can add to the zoo's baby boom, giving some of the most threatened animals in the world a better chance to survive in the wild.
Chester Zoo is more than a tourist attraction. Its overall mission is to make sure no species goes extinct. It's why animals like Asha and Jaya are so important. And guys, just on a personal note, best assignment ever.
I mean, it truly is. Kelly Kobiella, that was so beautiful and powerful, and we love to see animals getting saved.
Well, when they're little, they're always so cute, right?
There's nothing not to love.
The Komodo dragons kind of scare me once they get bigger.
You know, to each their own. Kelly, thank you for that. And of course, it's Friday, which means it's time to grab the popcorn because we have all of the films and shows you can't miss this weekend.
That's right. We have everything from films about groundbreaking musicians to a new show about a nun taking on an artificial intelligence machine. So let's get right into all of it with television host and pop culture expert Andrew Freund. Andrew, thanks for being here.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Good morning. Happy Friday. We teased it in the intro. Lots of biopics about black musicians from kind of all over history. We've got Chevalier, Little Richard, and Dear Mama. Break it all down. What should we see?
Yeah, so Chevalier is a very fascinating film starring Kelvin Harrison Jr. about a virtuoso violinist in Marie Antoinette's court. It is a true story about a man who was all of these things who Mozart was actually a fan of. But one of the things that's interesting that happened is he kind of got erased from the history books because he was black. And now we're seeing this gorgeous new film, the costumes, the music, and everything all about him. And finally, he's getting, you know, the due diligence he deserves.
So important, and I know he's not the only one. There was also Little Richard, right? And Dear Mama?
Yeah, so Little Richard, you know, Little Richard was really a trailblazer. He was the influence for Elvis. He was the influence for James Brown, the Rolling Stones. And he also was an influence in queer culture. And in this kind of documentary, we kind of see who the man was behind the scenes, but also who he influenced as well.
Ooh, it's so important to make sure those folks get the recognition they need, even if it comes a little later. Same with Dear Mama.
Dear Mama, you know, I didn't know about the relationship between Tupac and his mom. His mom was an activist. She was a Black Panther. She was a single mom. And this documentary, 5-part series, is really a love letter between mother and son, but also how much she, Afeni Shakur, influenced her son's music, and also how he became kind of this prolific poet in a way because of her activism.
So many great things to see, and there's 2 more films that we want to talk about. What can you tell us about The Covenant and Somewhere in Queens?
So The Covenant stars Jake Gyllenhaal, and it is about the U.S. withdrawals from Afghanistan. Jake plays a sergeant who is rescued by his interpreter. So basically, there's an ambush. Jake gets hurt. The interpreter basically drags him for miles, saves his life. Okay, now get this. Jake goes back to the U.S., only to find out that his interpreter was captured by the Taliban. So Jake's recovering from war, but it was like, I've got to save this guy because he saved me. He goes back to Afghanistan. I don't want to give, you know,
I was going to say, no spoilers. No spoilers.
But yeah, I mean, it's really a story about human resilience. It's by Guy Ritchie. It's one of Guy Ritchie's best films I've ever seen, hands down.
That's so incredible. Okay, so let's talk about Mrs. Davis on Peacock. People are saying it's unlike anything they've ever seen before.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to be on Hoda and Jenna later today, and we're also talking about Mrs. Davis. First of all, Peacock is killing it right now with the programming. But, okay, how do I set this up? Mrs. Davis is about an AI who controls the universe. So obviously right now that's in the news, very well-versed right now. And the person that is saving the world is a Catholic nun. So imagine a Catholic nun saving the universe from AI. It's by the same people that did Lost, the same people that did The Big Bang Theory. So you're going to get a little sci-fi, you're going to get some comedy, you're going to get a mix of all the things. Also, there's a quest for the Holy Grail. How does that sound?
Sounds kind of epic.
I'm curious about Somewhere in Queens. Tell us about that.
So Somewhere in Queens is Ray Romano's first film. He spent 6 years writing it, producing it, starring it, and he's the director. And it's really a story about father and son. His son was a basketball star in real life, and in this film, same thing happens. But one of the things that happens is the son decides not to play ball in college. So it's really a family tale that Ray, it's a passion project for him that he really, really, really does love. And I saw it, and it's a very, very sweet film.
Breaking out of that sitcom shell.
I like that.
100%.
I like Ray Romano. Finally, there's a remake of Dead Ringers. Quickly, what's going on with that one?
Dead Ringers. Okay, so Dead Ringers stars Rachel Weisz. She plays two twin identical gynecologists.
Interesting.
It gets a little sinister. It's a story about human reproduction. It's a story about female rights. It's a story about abortion. It's a story about detectiveness, and it's based on David Cronenberg's 1988 film. It gets very dark, so don't watch it with the kids.
Yeah.
Don't watch it with kids. But one of Rachel Weisz's best roles, I don't know if you guys seen Orphan Black.
Not yet, but definitely relevant to the current news cycle. Andrew,
100%.
thank you so much for breaking it down. Lots to watch this weekend.
Lots to watch, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.